And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello, and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. And in this hour, we're going to be speaking with former Governor Jesse Ventura. But don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can learn to become a medical intuitive counselor, or energy medicine practitioner. That's AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. So let me tell you a little bit about Jesse and get him on the air, because we have so much to talk about. Jesse Ventura is the former independent governor of Minnesota. He is also a former U.S. Navy SEAL, professional wrestler, movie actor, and a visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He has a reputation as an ultimate nonpartisan truth seeker. He has no qualms about questioning authority. And today we're going to be talking about his new book, DemoCRIPS and ReBLOODlicans. Hey, Jesse, how are you?
Good, Rita. You need to, and you're not alone. It happens a lot. You need to syllable out that last word. It's ReBLOODlicans. Well, and you're
people
not
that
alone.
People that listen to the show know that I'm a little dyslexic, and so I had to practice even getting it close. I was like,
and then the key too is the subtitle: "No More Gangs in Government."
Yeah. Governor, the last time you were on, you were just getting ready to go to court regarding the whole TSA thing. And now that that's over, I'm hoping that you can kind of share what has happened since then, but I want to share a story with you before you tell that. So before we went on, I was sharing with you that I had gone to a convention in Sacramento, California this past weekend, and I got to go through the scanner thing. Oh, my God. It was the most invasive thing that I've ever experienced in my life, and actually I posted on Facebook that going to my gynecologist was less invasive. You know, at least they give you a little paper sheet to cover up with. I just couldn't believe it. I felt so invaded.
Well, you should. You should, Rita, absolutely. I mean, what happened in my case, naturally, I have metal in my body now. And so every time I pass through the metal detector, it's going to go off. If I go through naked, it's going to go off, of course, because the metal's inside me. And so I'm subjected either to the X-ray machine, or as I call it, the microwave, or the pat-down, which now is a sexual assault. And at the time, I was doing my TV show probably 4 times a week during the past summer before I went to court and filed my lawsuit. And so that would have meant I would have been getting X-rayed at least 4 times a week for probably 10 weeks in a row. Now, they're not going to convince me that's not dangerous. They won't even let TSA employees wear radiation badges at the airport because they don't want anyone to know that if you're around these things all day, you could suffer damage from them. Not even their own employees are allowed to do that. So I never would go into the radiation or the X-ray machine. I would give in to the pat-down, and then, of course, the last one was when they changed it to the real thing where it is a sexual assault. I had it done to me one time. I immediately came home. I called up my attorneys. I said, I want to sue. I want to stop this. And initially, wait till you hear this, initially we were going to sue under the American Disabilities Act, which, of course, states that you must accommodate the disability. They're exploiting it with the metal in my body. Well, my attorneys called me back 2 days later, and they said, well, we can't sue under the American Disabilities Act. And I said, really? This case seems like it's made for it. They said, no, the reason is because it doesn't apply to the government. So, in other words, they make laws that apply to all of us in the private sector, but they themselves don't have to abide by their own laws. Now, that being said, we then moved forward and felt the strongest case we had was the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which, of course, is the amendment reasonable search and seizure. And the key word there, naturally, is reasonable. We sued under the premise it is not reasonable to believe that Jesse Ventura is a threat. I've been flying for 30 years throughout my career. I'm a premise that I wanted to take in front of a jury and be able to get discovery. I spent $20,000 of my own money to get it in front of a federal judge, and the federal judge ruled that she didn't have jurisdiction. Now, that's what they're doing with every case on TSA and Homeland Security. The court system merely will not hear the case. They throw it out because I believe they know if I got in front of a jury and was allowed discovery through a normal trial system, that they would lose, and which would open up a real can of worms for them. So they throw it out, stating they don't have jurisdiction. Now, if a federal judge does not have jurisdiction over a constitutional question, then, of course, no one does. And that's the premise of what they're doing. No one has jurisdiction over the airport. So what people out there need to know is that when you go to any airport in the United States of America today, you are not protected by the Constitution, you are not protected by your Bill of Rights, and they can do anything that they want to you, and there's nowhere you can go to seek redress. Well, I took the advice of Janet Napolitano, who's head of Homeland Security, which I now call the Gestapo. She said, if you don't like it, don't fly. So I have not flown in nearly 2 years now. It's been, I guess. I refuse to fly because I will not go to an airport and be treated like a criminal. And the dangerous thing about this is get ready, because they're going to move it into the bus stations. They're going to move it into the train stations. And in Tennessee right now, Tennessee has approved this. They have what are called TSA Viper teams, where they're out on the highways, and they randomly will pull motorists over and search their cars and search them. So, take a look at our Bill of Rights. It's in shreds, which is one of the chapters in my book.
I mean, it makes you think of, the World War II movies like Paint Bus? Got your paint bus?
Yeah, exactly. Well, what's interesting is that I live in Mexico half the year, and now, of course, the press, when I told them I wouldn't fly again, they kind of laughingly said, well, how are you going to get to Mexico, where you live down there? And I looked at them and laughed, and I said, well, I haven't driven it yet but one time, and those were one time I flew it under special circumstances, that there was an illness and death in my family, and we couldn't leave early enough, so I did fly it 1 out of 7 years, but I've driven it every time, 3,000 miles each way. Having said that, you should see what it's like crossing the border. When you go into Mexico, there's nobody even there. When you go from the U.S. into Mexico, I actually stopped my vehicle once, rolled my windows down, looked around, said, doesn't someone at least give me a piece of paper and say Buenos Dias? And, because Mexico doesn't care. And one time I crossed at Tecate, and the immigration guy in Mexico was just opening his office, and I pulled up, I said, Senor, can I get my papers? And he looked at me and says, get him an Ensenada. It was too early in the morning, he didn't want to deal with it. So I laughingly didn't get them at all. So I like to call myself a gringo without papers in Mexico. But now reversing that and coming back to the United States, last year when I crossed coming back to the United States, probably 95 to 98% of the licenses on the cars were U.S. It was 7 lanes, and it took 2 hours sitting there before I was allowed back in my own country. So I like to refer now that when you return to the United States, it's very much like trying to go into East Berlin.
It's been like that for a long time. I used to live in California, so we would tool into, Mexico periodically, and I learned the early trick, because we would just cross the border and go to do some shopping, park your car, walk across the border, and that still was challenging.
Oh, yeah, that's if you're only crossing the border, but my unfortunate situation is I drive 850 miles down into Mexico, so walking's out of the question for me.
Rental car on the other side, park your car on the other side, and then pick it up on your way home.
Yeah, no, because I have to bring too much stuff with me and all that. So I just put up with it. One time, here's another funny story. I took my small RV one year, and coming back, do you know what they confiscated from me? And this is Homeland Security for you, keeping you safe from terrorists. You know what they confiscated from me and wouldn't allow me to have? And I even said, I am the former governor of Minnesota, and I vouch that I purchased this in Minnesota. You know what they took from me? My dog's dog food.
Huh?
Yeah, because I have a very special dog, so we buy a very, expensive brand of dog food for him, which I get in Minnesota, and I carry bags of it in my vehicle down to Mexico, because I'm down there 5 months, and so he can eat. And I don't want to feed him, any other food. Well, if I bring too much, I leave it down there, and I carry just enough to get back home to Minnesota, and I put it in a clear plastic bag underneath the sink. Well, because it wasn't in its original container, they confiscated it, so I then had to go to the truck stop and buy him Gravy Train or whatever garbage dog food so I could get home. And I even vouched. I said, as the governor of Minnesota, I'm telling you this was bought in Minnesota, and I could have seen it if I would have had, say, 20, 50-pound bags. But I had enough. I told the guy there's only enough for my dog. My dog, there's 5 meals for him to get home on. You got to be kidding me. And they took it from me and wouldn't let me have it.
Dog food.
Dog food.
It's like, here, dog, have a bite.
I mean, so that's how they're making you safe, is they're confiscating dog food at the border.
But see, even, going through the airport, they do ridiculous thing. They say no more than 3 ounces of this or 3 ounces of that. And we had gone on a trip, and so my husband had this little, it was a bottle of aftershave, and there was just a little bit in the bottom.
I know that story well. I had it happen to me.
They confiscated everything.
But
there's 3 ounces.
I had it happen to me with toothpaste. I was leaving quickly when I was still flying, and I realized I had no toothpaste in my bag, my travel bag. So I went into my bathroom and I grabbed a tube of toothpaste that had barely any left in it. It was almost empty, but it was enough to, get me through my weekend trip or whatever it was. I put it in my bag. They took it from me because the original size was 8 ounces or whatever it was, 6 ounces. And I looked at the guy and I said, but it's almost empty. And they go, that doesn't matter. That's what it was originally. Anything over so many ounces. And they took my toothpaste from me.
It's just amazing. It's like, okay. Let's switch gears here real fast because,
sure.
Again, another big news item that I would like to get your 2 cents on is the whole bin Laden thing. As a former Navy SEAL and conspiracy theorist, what did you think happened?
Well, first of all, I don't like to call myself a conspiracy theorist because the whole 9/11 thing itself, the story you were told by the government, is merely a conspiracy theory. The government, what they told you is the same thing. They told you that 19 Islamic radicals armed with box cutters defeated our multi-billion-dollar air defense system, all while conspiring with a bearded guy in a cave in Afghanistan. Well, that's their theory. They've never proven it. They've never even done an investigation to prove what they told us. So, but anyway, getting back to the bin Laden thing, I don't know. I know that the Navy SEALs can get the job done, if given that opportunity. That part of it, I can assure you, they can and will get the job done. But could they be deceived also? I imagine they could, because I'm not going to question what happened on the ground because I wasn't there. And, but they're under a time schedule when you do those types of operations where you got to go in and you will give the target one opportunity to surrender. If they don't exercise that option, then you will take them out. It's as simple as that. They will be killed. And because you have to move and get out of there. You don't want to lose any of your own men. But having said that, do I believe the thing? I don't know, because my government has lied to me so often. They lied to me about the Gulf of Tonkin incident that put us in the Vietnam War. They lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They lied saying that Iraq had ties to al-Qaeda, and even their own 9/11 commission, which anything put in their report had to be unanimous. Even they said there were no ties to al-Qaeda. They lied about the rescue of Jessica Lynch, and the one that really angers me more than any is that they lied about the murder of Pat Tillman, the football all know him and went off to join and defend our country. Well, they lied about his death. So to me, the government has no credibility whatsoever when it comes to telling me things. Neither does the mainstream media, because they're simply the mouthpiece. So I don't know. One of the suspicious things about the whole thing is that doctors have said that apparently the disease that bin Laden was inflicted with is generally fatal within a year or two. Well, how did this guy manage to survive 10? I don't know. So that makes me wonder about it and question the whole thing. But I wasn't there. I'm not privy to any top secret information anymore or anything of that nature. So I don't think I can give an opinion on whether the killing of bin Laden was real or not. But again, the government has no credibility with me. And people need to understand government is people, and people will lie.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, let's talk about your new book, DemoCRIPS and ReBLOODlicans. Did I say that right?
ReBLOODlicans.
ReBLOODlicans.
There you go. You got a syllable
out. Go with me, Governor.
Okay. No gangs in government.
Do you think there are gangs in government?
Absolutely, they are gangs.
How can that be true?
Well, because we put the definition of party in Webster's dictionary right in the front of the book. And the definition of a party is not them. A party's a festive occasion. That isn't, why do they call themselves a party? Well, it's no different than I used to ride with the Mongols Motorcycle Club, the black and white out of California many, many years ago. Well, on the back of every motorcycle gang, be it Hells Angels, Mongols, Banditos, Outlaws, whoever they are, you will see the two letters MC. Well, that stands for Motorcycle Club, like the chess club, right?
Right.
Yeah, so they're not a party because, like I said, we give the Webster's definition of the word party, and it doesn't have party, like I said, it's a festive occasion of fun. They're not that. They're a gang. No different. And let me tie it in. Okay, the Democrats, or as I call them, the DemoCRIPs. I'm taking the liberty with the two street gangs of L.A., the Crips and the Bloods, and I apologize to them for using them in this manner, but I don't think they'd mind. What is a blue state? That's a Democrat state, right? What's the color code of the Crips? Their color code is blue. Okay, the Bloods are naturally red. That's the color of the Bloods gang, red. And what is a red state? Well, that's a Republican state. So they've even stolen the color code of the street gangs.
Interesting. But if
and let me add, and the other thing that compares them to a gang, which I have experience in, is that your first and utmost total loyalty is to the gang, just as theirs is to their alleged party. Your second and utmost loyalty is to the money that supports the gang. If the gang is doing something illegal, the focus is always on how do we continue with this type of operation so we continue to keep our coffers full of money. Well, these two political parties, their second allegiance is to their high corporate campaign donors, the people that provide them with the money. So there is a great parallel between them and street gangs, and as I state in the book, the only difference between these two and the Crips and the Bloods are that these guys wear Brooks Brothers suits.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting because when you think of gangs, you think of drugs and guns. And it seems like our government runs drugs and guns, too.
Sure they do. Well, we're the biggest gun manufacturer and gun exporter to the world. I mean, if there's a war, rest assured they've been armed by the United States gun manufacturers.
But then there's, what's been in the news lately about the whole government giving permission, I'm not sure how to phrase this, to the gun sellers on the border to allow guns to go into Mexico, and I guess they've gotten busted with the whole Fast and Furious thing, and it doesn't make them any different than regular. It just seems so illegal. How's that?
Well, What did I tell you? They're the same as the street gangs. No difference. Well, and remember this, I live in Mexico, and so for all those people out there that think that we should give up our guns and our Second Amendment rights, well, in Mexico is your prime example. Guns are illegal in Mexico. I cannot have one down there. Neither can any other Mexican have one. So the old cliche is true. If you take away all the guns of the honest people, only the criminals will have them. And that's the case in Mexico. Only the drug cartels down there have the guns. You've had literally tens of thousands of people killed down there. And how are they able to fight back if they cannot defend themselves? And so, all the people up here, the liberals that say, oh, stop the guns, who don't have people to have individual rights to own guns, well, and that's the first thing that will end up making it to where only the bad guys will have them. And let me add this. I was actually physically in the Philippine Islands, when Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and became a dictator. Well, you know what his first directive was? He ordered all citizens of the Philippines, I believe they had a 10-day or 2-week grace period, to turn in all their guns, or it was the death sentence. Now, why would a dictator make his first priority to disarm the citizens? And so all these people that advocate disarmament of citizens in this country, dictators do that. And that's the first thing that they do. And I want to warn people, there is a meeting coming up with Hillary Clinton and the UN where they want to sign on to this international treaty, and it's going to have international gun registration. Another step towards globalization. International gun registration, which if we, the United States, do sign on to this, well, then you'll have to register all your guns internationally, and that will be another way that they will have to take them from you. And it will completely violate our Constitution and our Second Amendment. So be aware that that's looming in the future and could well probably happen by as late as this fall.
That doesn't even make any sense. How am I going to get my gun past TSA, please? That they care about my gun unless it's just, counting numbers, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
more tracking, more control.
Clearly, it's a movement to disarm the populace of the world. Hopefully, I imagine their idea is that, we will disarm the entire world so that there'll be no private ownership of any guns, or we'll know where all of them are so we can come and take them if you have to register them. I've said officially I don't own a gun. And I will continue to state that. But no, that's how I view it, is that it's a global movement to literally disarm the populace of the entire world of any way that they can protect themselves. And, I think it's also a step towards this globalization or one world government. And if we sign on to this treaty, I urge people to contact your senators, because I learned of this via Rand Paul sent me a thing on it. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. And I don't fully agree with everything Rand does, but on this one I do. Ron Paul's son. And he sent me a thing on it personally, laying the whole thing out of what they're attempting to do. And he's trying to organize so that this treaty will be killed by the Senate, because it will require 66 votes or whatever it is in the Senate in which to pass it. And that's why he's so vehemently working so that this thing will get killed in the Senate, and then we can't sign on to this treaty. But who knows? Now they can loop the Senate and they can loop Congress, and maybe it'll just require the president will be able to do it himself, because it seems that our country doesn't follow the Constitution or the Bill of Rights at all anymore.
That's where I was just going to go. It just seems like even if you contacted your senator or congressman, that it really wouldn't make any difference, and they were just either going to vote however they were going to vote, or the president would use his executive authority to just sign it on.
Well, hopefully that there'll be enough outcry that won't happen, and if the citizens rally enough and stand together on this deal, it won't happen. But but we'll have to hold our breath, wait and see.
It's just interesting. It seems like day by day, week by week, our rights and our choices and our freedoms are just slowly being chipped away.
Well,
with this legislation too.
Nobody wants to read history, apparently, in our country at all anymore, and nobody's listening to the people that created our country. On that particular issue, the great Ben Franklin had a wonderful quote. He said, "Those that will give up their liberty for security shall have and deserve neither." And that's the point. If you think the government can make you safe, well, the only way government can, it's an oxymoron, really. The only way government can make you safe is to take your freedom. They have to lock you up and take away all your freedom. Then they can allegedly make you safe. And as Ben Franklin said, shall have and deserve neither. You won't have freedom, and you won't have liberty, and you won't have security either, because liberty is security. And if you take one, you won't have the other either. Like in chapter 2 of my book, when I talked about political parties, I have 3 tremendous allies that agree with me 100%, and I urge people to read this book. My 3 allies are George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. They all talk about how when political parties take over the government, that'll be the destruction of the United States. I believe we're already there.
One of the things that I've noticed, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is when you look at the parties, there really doesn't seem to be a difference. There were so many people that when Obama got elected thought there would be these big changes and we would get out of Guantanamo and we'd get out of the war, and there was so much hope. But it doesn't seem like any of those things happened. And so are both parties the same in your opinion, or does the president get hamstrung that he can't really do what his agenda is?
They're both the same. Let me explain it in a little more detail. I'll use the analogy of something else I did in my life called professional wrestling. They're just like pro wrestling. I taught that class when I was at Harvard. And what I mean by that is that in front of us and in front of the people, they pretend to be adversaries, the same as pro wrestling. But behind the scenes, they're business partners. They're working together. In pro wrestling, you do it to create the show. It's merely entertainment, so it's harmless. But with them, it is not entertainment. But they're working together all the time for their objective, and that's to maintain and hold their power structure and continue to do business as they see fit. I encourage people, well, again, going back that they're also the same as, I have a chapter in the book dedicated to President Obama, and the title of the chapter is Spare Change You Can Believe In.
I had a question that just totally left my mind.
I'm sorry about that, but it'll
that's
come
okay.
to you.
You're saying that, behind the scenes, they're all buddy-buddy, chum-chum, but what is
Sure
their objective? I mean, I understand that, they have this desire to be in power and this desire to have control, but after that, what's the big deal?
Well,
what do they want?
Look at it this way. I also cover a chapter on things that they get that you don't, okay? Congressmen and senators. And I always found it interesting that whenever they go into office, congressmen or senators, many of them are not millionaires, but they come out millionaires. And that always puzzled me. I thought they don't make that much money. A congressman's pay is about $174,000 a year, and after you deduct taxes, I mean, I'm sure the ones that are there for 20, 25 years, you could accomplish it at that salary. But if you're there for just, say, 4 or 8 years, you're not going to make enough money to be a millionaire unless you're already one. Well, then we found all the statistics on how their investments do, and we print this in the book. The average, and this is just the average Congress and senator, because of their knowledge and their ability to legally do insider trading, which I might add, we go to jail for it if we do insider trading, the average return on a congressman or senator's stock market investments is 12%. That's higher than Warren Buffett gets. Now, county law that says now that that's illegal. I'm waiting to see one of them get arrested for it. You're not going to see anybody get arrested for that. They're going to continue to make their money. There'll be no watchdog watching over them. They will continue to do so. And again, going to things that they can do that we can't. They've built an entire political system around the concept of bribery. If you bribe them with money, and thanks to our illustrious Supreme Court now, that said that corporations are the same as individuals and that money is a form of free speech, they're getting it in by the boatloads now. And I'm not opposed to that necessarily, but there should be open disclosure, and all the money should go directly to the candidate, not to these super PACs, because super PACs can lie. Nobody watches over anything they say. It should all go directly to the candidate, and with open disclosure, they should have to disclose everybody that gives them money. I have a solution for that too, Rita. You know what it is?
What is it?
I think that all presidential candidates and Senate and congressional candidates should be required by law to wear NASCAR racing suits. Because when you watch like the great Jimmy Johnson when he wins a NASCAR race, well, you can read who all his sponsors are. He has patches all over his racing suit. Well, we should do that. It would make us informed voters, because then we should do that. We should do that because then we would. I'm sorry, I got a train going by my house. I can't hear good. We should do that because then, as informed voters, we could see them when they talk to us. We'd be able to read who owns them.
But why should the candidate get money versus the campaign? I mean, I can understand where, the corporation.
Yeah, it's the campaign. The candidate's campaign and his committee. But what you have now, the corporations can give unlimited money to these super PACs. Super PACs can run their own ads on TV. You see them all the time, where it'll list the super PAC underneath who ran this ad. Well, there's nothing to say that they can't just blatantly lie, and they do. I mean, when you watch these ads from candidate against candidate, it looks like both of them should be arrested. They portray the opposite side like they're a criminal. And there's no accountability in that, where if you make it go to the direct candidate and the candidate's campaign committee, which the candidate is responsible for, then you at least get some credibility, where if a bold-faced lie is told, there should be some mechanism to expose that and some type of penalty for it.
But then there's the situation with like John Edward, where they supposedly figured out that he used a bunch of money to cover up his affair with that woman. And it was interesting because when he was in court, there was some talk about, him being in court, but then when they came to a decision, it got totally silent.
Well, again, but at least John Edwards got caught, didn't he?
He did get caught.
There you go. At least that happened.
Shockingly.
Where with the super PACs, they're not going to get caught in anything. They're not going to be held accountable for lying. They're not going to get caught on how did they spend the money. So, and then another thing that they get that we cover in the book, health care. Now, all you hear about is Obamacare, and you shouldn't have government-run health care. Well, excuse me, what do the veterans have? All veterans have government-run health care. Now, are we screwing over the veteran because government-run health care is bad? I don't think so. And so if it's good enough for a veteran, it should be good enough for the rest of us. And then you look at them, the congressmen, the senators, and the political parties. Get this, they have government-run health care. They're telling you not to have it, and you shouldn't have it, yet they have it, and they have it to the extent they get 5 options to choose from with their health care. 5 of them. Most of us are lucky to have one if we have any at all. And my position is that a congressman or senator should not get any benefit more than an average citizen does.
Well, it's one thing if they are getting those benefits while they're in office, or if they do their 20 years or whatever and retire from office as part of like a retirement package, I could see them getting ongoing health care.
I can't.
Well, I'm just being kind. I'm just being kind. Where I have an issue is they go in there for 4 years and boom, they get all of these benefits for the rest of their life.
It's worse than that. First of all, why should you get retirement if you're doing public service? There should be no retirement. It's called public service. Second of all, we found this out in the book. There, I believe, 20 or 21 have been convicted of felonies, and they still get their retirement. They're felons. They've been convicted of felonies, and they still get their retirement. It doesn't matter.
That part I really don't get. When some of these people get brought up on charges and they get convicted, why don't they just get kicked out of the government? How do they get reelected? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, they're a party. They're not a gang, are they? Again, it's such a double standard. It's such a one-way street. They don't have to abide by the very rules that they make us abide by. And now let me go on and state this to people. We have the ability to stop this. It's in our power. It's called voting. Now, when I ran for governor of Minnesota, mainstream media tried to hammer home, well, if you vote for Jesse, it's a wasted vote because he can't win. And I think it offended Minnesotans somewhat, and I did win. But I would like to reverse that thought and state unequivocally that if you're a voter out there and you vote for a Democrat or Republican, then you have wasted your vote because you're going to get the same thing. There's an alternative out there right now, and his name is Gary Johnson. For all the Ron Paul supporters out there, it appears that Congressman Paul is now dropping out of the race, but there's still millions of his supporters out there. I urge them, don't vote for Mitt Romney, the Republican. Vote for Gary Johnson. He's a former moderate Republican. He was the two-time governor of New Mexico when I was governor of Minnesota. He is running as the Libertarian candidate for president. And vote for Gary Johnson. And right now, Congress has an approval rating of what, about 10%?
Yeah,
so it shows 90% of us are dissatisfied with the two gangs and what they've done in Congress. The way you can lash out is to vote for an alternative candidate. Gary won't win, and I'll tell you why. Because they won't let him debate. They also control the debates. Up until 1992, all the presidential debates were governed by the League of Women Voters. Well, after Ross Perot scared their pants off, getting 1 out of 5 votes back in 92, well, they saw fit then they had to amend that. So they took it away from the League of Women Voters, and they formed the Federal Debate Commission that happens to be run by 2 former heads of the 2 gangs, or the 2 parties for people that want to call them that. And they now run it. You notice Perot got 1 out of 5 votes in 92 and was not allowed to debate in 96. We have not had a third voice up there since 92. If Governor Johnson were allowed to debate, he could win because I proved that. When I ran for governor of Minnesota, I was polling 10% at the primary. 6 weeks later, 7 weeks later, whatever it was when the election took place, I won because I was allowed to participate in 6 debates. And as soon as I debated, my poll numbers started making this meteoric rise, and I ended up winning the election. But see, they don't allow any third person to win because they won't allow them to debate.
When you were on last time, there was some conversation about Ron Paul possibly going on an independent ticket. Why did that all fall apart? I mean, he just kind of dropped out and disappeared from the whole presidential election. Any thoughts on what's going on with him?
He was very smart to stay a Republican all the way to the primary because that allowed him in their debates and it gave him plenty of TV time, which he needed. You've got to have that. So it was very smart of him to do that, but why he won't go independent, I don't know, and it's too late now because you have to get ballot access in all 50 states, and there's another thing that's fraudulent. It should be the same thing for every state if you're running for president to get ballot access, but it's not. Every state you have to do different things. You have to jump through different hoops if you're not a Democrat or Republican. So it's all fixed there too. And it's too late for Paul now. There's no time between now and the election for people to get him ballot access in all 50 states. And I might add, remember, in 1988, Ron Paul was a libertarian. So, again, I can't emphasize enough, Gary Johnson, the libertarian candidate for president, I urge people, I'm going to vote for him, and I urge all the American citizens, or many of them, to join with me and truly make your vote count something.
Do you really think our vote, unless we bring in a third-party person, and I still worry about that, but unless we bring in a third-party person, will our vote really count?
First of all, why do you worry about that?
About bringing in...
Yeah, what's the matter with the third-party person? I was.
Well,
Governor Angus King of Maine
because
was.
on a national platform, it's not about the person. It's about what happens once he says, and I'm going to say, I do. What will happen to him, how much they're going to try to influence him and get him to convert to being one of the different gangs.
It's better than what you've got. At least they still have to do that, don't they? If you elect one of them, they don't have to do anything. And who's to say, did they convert me? Absolutely not. Did they convert Governor King, who's going to end up in the Senate now, because he went back to the private sector in Maine for about 8 years, and now that Olympia Snow's not running, independent Angus King is for her Senate seat, and the polls have him so far ahead, I don't think it's possible for him to lose. He's extremely popular in Maine. And, they never converted me. Remember something, a person that runs as a third-party person has already decided against these two parties. Why would they change their stripes once they got in there? I didn't, and Governor King didn't.
You just hear the stories about the arm twisting and the other kinds of control that makes it where where they don't have a choice, where they have to kind of go along with the game. Or,
why? They can't twist my arm. When I ran for governor, I didn't take 1% of PAC money or special interest money. And the first thing I did when I got in office, I told my staff, I will not meet with a lobbyist. My entire 4 years as governor of Minnesota, I never met once with a lobbyist.
So what you're saying is that it is possible, because I didn't know that this was possible, that you could go in on and I'm thinking more on the national platform, and keep separate from their agenda and not have them try to run you over or get rid of you.
Oh, they will try. Certainly they will. In fact, in my last year in office, I became the most powerful man in America. You know why?
Why?
The Democrats and Republicans teamed up against me on the budget. They rejected my budget. They put forth their own, and they overran both my vetoes. Who else in the country can get them in bed together? That makes me the most powerful political figure in the country.
Well, you're powerful anyway.
Well, look at President Obama right now. Anything he tries to do, the Republicans go the opposite way on him. So I had more power than him. I got them together to oppose me. And ultimately, what did it lead to in Minnesota? I'll tell you what it led to. My last budget was right after the recession after 9/11, which they rejected. And they put forth theirs, which was nothing but smoke and mirrors, and it was a roll of the dice to try, and I fooled them. They thought I was going to seek re-election, and I didn't. So they were left holding the bag. Well, they were banking to get saved on their budget that they proposed that the economy would get good again, and it would bail them out. The opposite happened. The economy got even worse. Well, Minnesota last year faced a $5 billion deficit, and our 2-year budget's only $30 billion. And it was all a direct result of what they did to me. People need to remember that when economic decisions are made, it's really a trickle-down effect. in the big piece of machinery for the machinery to spit out those decisions that were made 3 or 4 years previous and affect the machine.
One of the things that you were talking a little bit about earlier is the whole concept of globalization. If we globalize, who would end up being in charge of the world, king of the world?
Probably the richest people, and I'm only speculating. I mean, who's in charge of the United States right now? The Federal Reserve. They're the ones that print the money. Follow the money, as Deep Throat and Watergate said. The money will lead you to all your answers, always does, always will. And so it'll end up the most powerful who will be running the world will be the wealthiest people in the world. They will run it, I'm sure, because, as I said, the Federal Reserve is the power broker right now. I mean, take a look at Barack Obama. He'll get up and give a speech railing on Wall Street, right? And yet who's his biggest contributor? Goldman Sachs.
Which is hypocritical.
Exactly. Totally. You know, always don't believe what comes out of their mouth. Believe in the actions they take and what they do. They can say anything, but it's what do they do? What is the reality of the situation? That's what you have to look at, not what they tell you.
You know, and when you start talking about the banks and big money like that, it seems like CEOs and the president. Oops, you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Are the ones that are getting, you know, these giant bonuses and big chunks of change, and then there are the people that work for them that get paid, you know, like minimum wage or $10 an hour, and it just seems like it's not fair, it's not balanced for the regular people, the Americans and other people in the world that are just, you know.
Well, let me put it in this perspective. I believe that healthcare should not be a for-profit business, but it is. It's run by corporations, healthcare is. And we show in the book the CEOs, while healthcare itself has gone up for all of us to the tune of about 35%, the CEOs of these companies, the healthcare providers, are making $14, $16 million a year. That's obscene. You know, to me, in this country, everyone who is sick should have the ability to go to the doctor. Yeah, we're the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have that ability. And we're also the richest country in the world, or at least we were. And like I said, CEOs of these healthcare industry corporations are making $15 million a year, while the rates to us people have gone up as high as 35 to 40% on our healthcare.
It's a
joke. Who
joke.
are we paying? Are we paying for healthcare, or are we paying the pockets of these big-time CEOs? It seems obvious to me who we're paying.
Well, and even when you talk about the health care, you get a lot less for a lot more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, so you go to the doctor, and God forbid there's something wrong with you, and you think, you know, well, the plan is supposed to cover 90%, and by the time you go home, you get these outrageous bills because, well, this wasn't covered.
And remember this, it's not the doctors either, because I have a dear close friend who's an orthopedic hand surgeon, and he told me about a year or so ago, he said that something that he used to do, a procedure that would, he'd make, say, $2,500, today he's only making, lucky if he's making $800 or $900 for the same procedure. So he has to do like 3 or 4 more operations to equal the money that he used to get for one. So it isn't the doctors getting rich either. They're working cheaper too. They're turning our health care into McDonald's, you know, to where they have to, like McDonald's food, where they pump out the hamburgers like nothing. Well, that's how the doctors have to work now. They have to do what they used to get paid for if they did 5 cases a day. They now have to do 15 or 20 to equal that. Well, I guarantee you, when doctors are doing that many, your care will not be as good.
Well, and then you add in the baby boomers are moving into more retirement ages and looking to Medicare, Medicaid for their medical down the road, and there are increasing number of doctors that are not taking elderly patients because they get paid pennies on the dollars for care.
Yep, exactly. And that, again, it's all because healthcare is now a corporate for-profit business. And whenever corporations, just like the prison system, let's switch gears a moment. Everybody screams out there, privatization, privatization, less government. Well, they've turned our prisons over now to corporations now. Well, get this. Corporations are about bottom-line profit. Now it is required that every prison be at least 80% full. Otherwise, the corporation doesn't make profit. So guess who's going to pay? All of us, because we're going to get sent to prison so that we can keep the prisons full so that the corporations are profitable. There's another example of it, but yet everybody screams, too much government, they're too big. Well, in many ways they are. I won't deny that. Government gets into areas that they shouldn't be into. But in things like prisons and things of that nature, it should absolutely be run by the government and not by corporations. But you've got corporate prisons now, and again, I'll repeat it, they've got to be at least 80% full for the corporation to make a profit. So, if you sell that bag of marijuana, you're probably going to go to jail because they need you, like they did to Tommy Chong. He sold the pipe through the mail and spent 2 years in federal prison for it. And because they got to keep the prisons full because they're run by corporations.
We're getting a little close on time, but I want to ask one last question.
Okay.
And talk about.
And then I do have to go because I have another interview at the top of the hour.
Okay. The economy, it's like President Obama recently said that the private sector is doing really good. But it doesn't seem like, like if you ask me, if you ask friends of mine and different people that are regular people, if they think the economy is doing good, they just look at you like, no. What do you think is going on?
The economy's not doing good. If you're out on the street and you're talking to people, here's what they're doing. They're systematically destroying the middle class, I think by design. All these people now that are anti-union, okay, unions can become abusive. There's no doubt about it because why? They're run by people, and people can be abusive the same way government can be abusive. But people need to remember the middle class in this country was created by unions. And as the unions fail, I saw a chart the other day. As the unions decline, so does median income. Declines right with it. They parallel each other. They're identical, the same lines. And so when we're breaking up all the unions like Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, did, and people still reelected him in a recall, when the unions go, so will the median income wage go with it, and so will the middle class, because it is the unions that created the middle class in this country. Collective bargaining, the way to ensure that you get a decent wage, the way to ensure you get decent working conditions. When the unions go, we'll be back to sweatshops again. And then I can't wait to hear all the people crying and moaning about that. How did this happen? What went wrong? Well, it's because no one supported unions. And but again, let me state, unions can be abusive also. You need to overwatch them to ensure that they are doing what they're supposed to do and doing what they're supposed to do with your dues and money. But without unions, we will go back to just rich and poor in this country, mark my words.
Well, that's scary because most of the people will be on the poor side.
Oh, absolutely. 95%. Well, like the Wall Streeters said, it'll be 1 against 99. 99% of us will be poor, and 1% of us will be rich.
But wait, pick me. I want to be on the rich side. Governor, the music's going to come up here in just a second. Any last words for the listeners?
Just again, I can't reiterate enough. If you want your vote to count, vote for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate for president. Join me and demand he be allowed in the debates. Start writing and organizing. Get Gary Johnson in the debates.
Thank you for coming on, Governor. And I look forward to your next book and you coming back on so we can catch up on government.
All right. Thank you, Rita. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye. That's former Governor Jesse Ventura, his new book, DemoCRIPS and ReBLOODlicans, No More Gangs in Government. And next week, we're going to be having Dan LaFay on talking about inside the paranormal world of ghost hunting. And second hour, we'll have Lynn Woodward talking about making miracles. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita.